As therapists and grandmothers, we've been thinking a lot about the world of adolescent boys and young men and the world that they're growing up in. Many boys begin life emotionally open, expressive, and eager for connection. But somewhere along the way, many learn that their feelings aren't welcome or even safe to show. Today, we're talking about what adolescent boys and young men may be quietly carrying inside, and how just one caring adult who listens, notices, and shows up can make a life-changing difference.
We are so interested in the research that shows early adolescent boys actually believe vulnerability threatens their belonging. So they hide their sadness, their fear, and their loneliness. And interestingly enough, often the only emotion left available to them is anger. Please join us for an important conversation about understanding, supporting, and loving the young men in our lives. Do you sometimes feel lost in your relationships, your identity, or even your spirituality? Welcome to Gilmore&green, where healing and hope meet.
We are marriage and family therapists and relationship experts who care deeply about helping you grow, strengthen your relationships, and deepen your sense of meaning and spirituality.
We long to share from our clinical experience, years of training and solid research, including ideas about how to strengthen the things that matter the most to all of us in life.
We're so glad you're here. Our hope is to share simple, meaningful ideas that support you in your healing and in your growth. Welcome to Gilmore&green, where healing and hope meet. I'm Dr. Debbie Gilmore, a licensed marriage and family therapist, and today we want to talk about the emotional world of adolescent boys and young men. If you're a parent, a grandparent, an uncle, a neighbor, a teacher, therapist, coach, or a friend to a young man in your life, we hope this conversation will be helpful.
I'm Sharilyn Green, also a marriage and family therapist. And yes, Debbie, we are wondering how the young men in our world are really doing. We're wondering what challenges they might be facing. And I think most of all today, the quest of our podcast is how can we be more supportive of the young men in our families and our circles of influence? You know, you and I both have grandsons in this category. I think yours are in their late teens, mine are just starting into adolescence. So this is actually a deeply personal topic for both of us as we think, you and I, about what we can do as grandmothers to love and understand and better support our grandsons who might be feeling lonely. There could be a quiet pain or deep insecurity that they're experiencing when on the outside it looks like everything is fine. I'm thinking especially of parents of young men right now. Of course, they're the first line of action in this, and so I think my thoughts are the most focused on parents, but certainly what we can do as grandmothers and grandparents. And I want to add, Debbie, I know you feel the same way, that in all we do, we strive to honor and lift and empower men with the same equality we strive to do for women in all that we say and do.
Yes, this is deeply personal for both of us and many of you that are listening. I do have some that are in their late teens and one that's actually married. And as I think about as they grew up, they're all so different. And some of them have been more quiet than others. Some have been more vocal. But in general, there is a concern that they don't share their pain as much as women may. So when we look at the emotional lives of adolescent boys and young men, research is actually helping us understand some very important things. First, boys and young men often have fewer mental health resources and much less emotional support than young women. Many vulnerable emotions like sadness, anxiety, or even fear can trigger shame in young men. When that happens, they're less likely to talk about what they're feeling or to even seek help. So, depression tends to look different in boys and young men in general. Instead of sadness, it might show up as anger, irritability, withdrawal, or extreme risk taking behavior. Because of this, depression in young men is often harder to recognize and to treat. Many young men struggle quietly, and sometimes the consequences can be devastating. Men die by suicide at 2 to 4 times the rate of women, which of course is deeply concerning. We're also seeing changes in their education pursuit. According to Pew Research, about 47% of women ages 25 to 34 now hold a bachelor's degree, compared with about 37% of men. 30 years ago, those numbers were almost the same. And Sherilyn, as you have said, we both have grandsons and loved ones in this category. And that said, this brings it even closer to home for us. Today, there's about a 10-point gap with young women completing college at higher rates.
Yeah, Debbie, and as I'm listening to you, I'm going to talk about now some additional emerging research that you and I especially find deeply significant because it's about the attachment science that we love. And I think this is some of the most interesting stuff about this for me. So as we mentioned before in our teaser, boys do start out being emotionally open. As babies, girls and boys express distress at the same rate. They're more deeply relational and expressive until about the age 5 when things start to change. And this is when cultural, all kinds of factors teach them to restrict their emotions so that they look strong and independent, controlled, maybe stoic. And then the research says that by 10 to 12 years old, this message is kind of firmly in place in so many of their, perspectives and experience. What they actually learn in so many ways is that vulnerability threatens belonging.
Yeah, that's the concern, that vulnerability threatens their sense of belonging, or even that they could reach to feel, if they're insecure, to feel more connected. Psychologist Niobe Way did a longitudinal study of boys' friendships over a span of many years. They interviewed some boys ages 13, 15, and 18. And when they spoke with them at age 13, the boys described their friendships in deeply emotional ways. The boys talked about friends they trusted with everything and friends that they could cry with and felt deeply loyal to. One boy said this: "My best friend knows everything about me." But when these same boys were interviewed just a few years later at ages 15 and 18, many said that they no longer had friendships like that. Some said, "That would be weird. We just don't talk like that anymore." What researcher Niobe Way discovered was that the boys' longing for connection hadn't disappeared, but instead, the social rules around masculinity had changed. They didn't lose the need for close friendships. They simply learned that emotional closeness was no longer considered safe or acceptable. And honestly, we find that heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking. As you're talking, something just reminded me of an experience I had. In church one day, I was sitting there and a group of probably 13 boys came in. We down here in St. George get a lot of soccer teams from up north that sometimes come into our faith communities on Sunday. They came in and sat down, and I watched them, and they put their arms around each other. They were scratching each other's backs. They were leaning in. I was so stunned by it. I actually took a picture, so I would never forget. And so I love this study that you just talked about. It's so interesting to me, and it was just such a unique experience to see something so different in front of my eyes. Again, we're making progress, but it was unique for the very
It's
reason that you just
very rare. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and I could sense the sense of belonging they had with each other. They were so comfortable. Sometimes when boys are too affectionate, there's worries and fears around that, and they just were so relaxed. Anyway, I'll never forget it. So I just wanted to mention that as you talked.
That's amazing. And like we said, very rare. Something unique is happening with that group of boys, a team sense, maybe a camaraderie that we want to generate in the general public and be aware that's possible. It's just not going to happen naturally because of the way the world is moving.
Yeah. Yeah, so just to continue on, the research shows that the most emotionally restrictive period for young men is between the ages of 12 and 16. They become more compassionate later, decades later, when they become parents and often seek therapy and experience loss themselves and form deeper relationships. But that critical time of 12 to 16, so critical, right, is a time of emotional restriction for many young men. And so this can result in the avoidant attachment patterns that we often see in therapy as young men learn it's safer to suppress needs, to distance emotionally, and avoid vulnerability.
This is cultivated in them because we know through our work, especially, that there are boys that are very emotional and very sensitive and to the world, but they are cultivated and conditioned to not demonstrate that, to suppress that. That's tragic, in my opinion. Boys don't lose their emotions, they simply learn those emotions aren't safe to show. But one emotion often remains socially acceptable. That's anger. And that's why anger can become the only feeling many men believe they're allowed to express or show. But underneath that anger, there's often something much more vulnerable. Maybe it's shame, rejection, a sense of loneliness, and a deep longing for close connection.
Yeah, and if I think about some of the couples I see, I often hear men say, I'm not angry, I'm frustrated. And as I listen to this research, that makes so much sense to me. If you don't have access to all of your emotions, that would be so frustrating, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And I just think it's so interesting that that's maybe the one emotion that does feel acceptable to them and how frustrating that would be. I just love what you said as I think about that. So, yeah, we know that many young men have fewer close relationships and actually difficulty connecting emotionally when they do. And romantic relationships often then become the primary attachment bond for men. And when they enter serious partnerships or marriage, this in itself can create kind of an intense relational pressure for their partner or their spouse who is now their sole bond. You and I have been interested in the work of Dr. James Carroll, who also tells us today that young men still want to get married, but a lot of them don't feel confident or even ready to do so. He kind of calls it the marriage readiness factor, and the threshold is high in our world today for young men. They often don't feel marriageable or ready to get married or capable of doing what it takes to make all of those things happen, and they're getting married later in life. So I
That's
think,
right. They've been conditioned to believe that they need to have their career in place, their home, and their car, and then they can look for that companion. And that actually sends them into their mid to late 30s. So they're waiting much longer. Let's talk about adapting. So, what do adolescent boys and young men do when they don't know how to find the emotional connection they deeply need? What happens when their attachment needs go unmet? Well, adaptation. That's a normal human tendency. Some will armor up. They'll say, if I don't feel it, it can't hurt me. So they shut down and suppress those emotions. Some chase performance and achievement to prove their worthiness to be acceptable. Some shut down and withdraw and keep their struggles to themselves. Or, and this is one that we see quite commonly, some try to numb the pain through gaming, substances like drugs and alcohol or pornography. These are not signs of failure. They're just ways of coping. They're attempts to protect themselves from being hurt, rejected, or disconnected.
yeah, I think as you say those things, we can all visualize exactly those protective coping behaviors that make so much sense when they're in pain and hurting without the emotional access that we've been talking about. Debbie, I want to bring up something that I'm always really sensitive to. And then on top of this, there are some young men that may be navigating questions around their sexual orientation or gender identity. And this can add an entirely another layer, right, of vulnerability and loneliness to some young men. And we should be watching for this with deep sensitivity for these young men who may need to talk, they may need our love and our support and our help. And so that's another thing we can do is we talk about how can we support the young men in our circles of influence. We can create safe places and spaces, not just for this, but for everything, where they can talk, where they can reduce the deep fear and suffering that they're often doing alone in isolation and silence. We should also carefully watch for those suffering with mental health issues, as we've talked about, or for even young men who have special needs, where we can bring life changing support. I love what you said in the beginning, one adult, just one adult can make such a difference. And it's exciting and empowering to me to think that even just one of us can make a difference in each of these scenarios that young men may be suffering and struggling with.
That's right. I like to think of this stage of their development as trying to find out who am I? That identity piece that everyone needs to navigate through. And are there ways that we can help them feel more comfortable in this developmental stage of confusion and searching, a journey to find who am I? What can we do to help? Well, think about the adolescent boys and young men in your life right now. What messages about emotions do you think they're receiving? Maybe even from you. Research shows us that even one emotionally safe adult, as you said, Sherilyn, can make a powerful difference. I like to say a charismatic adult that somehow lights the way for them in example, not in pressure or rigidity. We find that incredibly hopeful and helpful. Young men don't need a perfect conditions. They need acceptance, consistency, and someone who sees them, someone who makes them feel seen and accepted in that experience. So, what can we do? Well, here's a few practical things that we can all do. We just need to have this awareness of what are those. We can increase awareness in ourselves. It helps to understand what often happens during early teens. And that's kind of what we're doing. We're just outlining this quiet struggle that they have. And so as boys grow into adolescence, they often start receiving messages from the world, sometimes subtle, sometimes direct and very clear, that boys shouldn't show too much emotion. Over time, these expectations about masculinity can lead boys to shut down or hide what they're feeling, and being aware of these pressures can help us support the boys in staying connected to their emotions and expressing them in healthy ways. So we can encourage connection. Think about those young boys that are in your world. Think about ways that you can encourage connecting with them. Take time to get to know them. Get to know those young men around you. Learn their names. There's nothing, in five diamond hotels. Now that's not five-star hotels, that's five diamond. That means top of the top. The employees are taught to say the hotel guests' names at least 3 times each day. Why? Because it sparks this sense of, oh, I matter. Learn the names of these boys, talk with them, notice when they do something well, and let them know that you notice that. Send a quick text or a note of encouragement. We know that they communicate by text. Sometimes a little support goes a long way. And for many boys, just one caring adult who sees them and believes in them can make a lasting difference, something they'll never forget.
Can I interrupt you as you're
Yes.
this, we had a really wise leader in our faith community that challenged our entire area. It was a large area to get to know the names of the young men and young women in our worlds.
Mm.
I remember sitting there thinking, "Oh my goodness, I'm scared to death of them. That sounds really hard to do that." I took that on. I started to learn their names. I would say hi to them in the halls. I watched other adults do that. And I'm going to get emotional about this. I developed some of the sweetest relationships I've had with some of those young men that I still have today. I'm so grateful for his wisdom and just please get to know their names. That's really all he said. That's a powerful suggestion for me, and I saw the benefits of that. So thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that, Sherilyn. I'm sure that in the beginnings of what you were doing, this quest to make them feel special and like they matter, I'm sure they were shocked at
Mm.
first to hear their name. And then that sparked their interest. And then I would guess, like we know humans do, will that happen again? And it did from you. And it became significant even to this day. They remember. So that's why we suggest this is a powerful but simple thing that we can all do. Thank you, Sherilyn, for sharing that emotional experience. There's another thing that about this. We want to normalize emotion and connection, which you did. You just made this. This is what we do. We connect with each other. I don't care how old you are. I don't care how old I am. I'm going to connect with you. Help the young men understand that it's normal to feel a wide range of emotions. Adults can support this by noticing and naming feelings, by responding with understanding instead of saying things like, don't cry, shake it off, oh, you'll be fine. When boys learn that their emotions are safe and acceptable, they're much more likely to stay connected to themselves and to the people around them.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this next one that we're bringing up. It's called skin hunger. A researcher named Ashley Montague gave us this term, and she argues that touch isn't a luxury, right? It's actually biological critical. You and I know in our own attachment work, Debbie, that it activates the powerful hormone of oxytocin that creates feelings of safety and trust and connection. So, what's so interesting to me is that, again, around age 5, boys begin to receive less touch, and if they're touched, it's more restraining and corrective rather than comforting. As I think about that, that makes so much sense to me. Girls often snuggle up, and that's just fine. But the touch for boys about that age becomes different. And so teenage boys become touch avoidant, right? And they'll even fear that they're looking too feminine or weak or even gay. And the important thing to remember is this need for touch in all of us doesn't disappear. And so it's another thing that we can do as adults. We can help young men with skin hunger with appropriate touch to just put our arms around them or touch their hand or make it okay to feel this important physical touch that we all need so
Yeah,
much.
I want to just point out too, research also tells us that even infant boys, baby boys, are held less than baby girls. And
Mhm.
why is that? Well, it's just this cultural thing, I'm going to guess. However, I am going to say that I had one little baby boy that just wanted to be held all the time, and that was precious to me. But in general, they're not held. So this skin hunger develops at a very early point in their lives. And it, like you said, is a biological need.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's really interesting. It's even earlier than I thought.
Mhm.
So one other thing that we can do as adults to help support our young men is protect their tenderness from any kind of public emotional shaming. Again, as we've talked about, and we all know that boys often hear man up or stop acting like a girl or don't be a baby. And just one adult maybe advocating and standing up for that kind of shaming, it really is, right? And saying something like, gosh, everyone gets hurt all the time. It's okay to feel this can change the entire meaning of that moment for a young man. Again, such a simple thing to do, but to be aware of times when, we can step in and maybe course correct what might be happening.
Yeah, what we're talking about here is experiential learning. And the reason this is significant is in the moment when they're feeling the emotion and we point it out and soothe them and say, it's okay. The brain experiences that memory, stores it in the hippocampus. This is brain science as a good memory. So we want to reinforce it when it's happening, not just talk about it. So, we can model and encourage open expression of emotion too. And what does that mean? Well, it's just helpful to encourage early. Fathers, in particular, can be powerful role models, fathers who demonstrate emotional experience. And we don't mean seriously over emotional, we just mean when it happens, show it and own it. But children learn most by observation. That is research as well. Boys often learn more from what they observe than what they are told. So when fathers openly show sadness when it occurs, when they talk about their feelings or even cry openly, boys learn that emotional openness is safe and acceptable. And I'm going to add to that, it takes courage for a man to show sadness. It takes courage. It's fearless. We can create space for conversation too. Spend time with the young men you love. Listen to them. We do too much output. We don't do enough input and listening. I always say if you feed them, they'll talk, and that's true. But be curious about their world, interview them, create moments where they can talk and feel understood. No matter what comes out of their mouth, say, wow, instead of, uh-uh. So Our presence can actually help them reconnect with emotions that they have pushed aside.
Yeah, Debbie, I want to interrupt right here because
Yeah.
I'm wondering if it would be helpful if you and I just for a second brainstorm just two or three questions. And you're so good at that. But, as we talk about creating space for conversation, I guess I've learned how valuable the right questions can be.
Yeah.
I, I'm just wondering if we could throw out, like maybe I was thinking something like, what's the thing you're most afraid of in life right now? Or when you're alone, what's on your mind? What's the heaviest thing on your heart or mind, right? I'm just thinking, what could we ask young men that would help them open up? I don't know. If you're so good at questions like this, I'm just curious what you might have.
Well, and as you are too, I know that for sure, especially by you sharing that experience with those young men that just continued and now it's such a rich connection. But when they have a hamburger in front of them, I want to start with what's most exciting about your life. It's going to open the conversation. But then they seem to resonate with the word hard. So I'll say to them, what's hardest in your life right now? They might talk about an exam that they just took or a teacher that they just can't get along with. But as we walk slowly into that conversation, eventually they're going to share some of the heartache that they experience because all along the way, we're demonstrating to them that we are interested, that we care. So I'm so glad you brought that up. It's just those two extremes. What are you most excited about? What are you good at right now? What's hardest for you? And then they won't trust the conversation first. So get them again with another hamburger and ask them again. And then they will start to trust, oh, this really does matter to you. I've had grandsons that actually now in their later teens call me on the phone. One in particular, I don't want to embarrass him, so I'm not going to say who it is, but he said, I'm hurting. I've got this girl in my life and I don't know what to do about it. I'm thinking about her all the time and I don't want to be needy. And I was just thinking, what a sweet request to reach out to me and say, what do I do with these new emotions? My answer was, that's so normal. And how exciting that you feel that way. I'm so glad you told me. So, do you have any other questions that you do, Sherilyn?
I'm thinking too, I listened to a father just this week talk about, an interaction he had with his son, and he's worried about him launching into adulthood. And so a lot of his questions were, do you realize how much life costs? And, things like that. And as I listened to that, that's certainly valuable. But my heart ached a little bit. I thought, oh, but if you'd also said, yeah, what are you most excited about? Or just the things. So we can become so focused on, are you all these things. If I can just say one more thing, our oldest son, one day I went to his parent teacher conferences in high school. He started with a zero period class that was on his own. He was taking it was a physics class. It was hard. I went to his next period, and he was the pianist for the choir, and a lot of pressure there to be performance ready for things. I kind of went through his whole day at school with each teacher, and by the end, I was like, oh my goodness, I cannot believe how much pressure. And then when he comes home from school, you know what I do? I say, how come you didn't make your bed this morning? I was like, oh. You know, it was such a powerful experience that day to step into his shoes a little bit and just see, what their day is like and the pressure and the expectations they feel, and then come home and we add to that. And so I just love these tender questions at times in front of a hamburger, like you've said, to just go, wow, how are you really? Yeah, what are you excited about? I love the positivity of that. And yeah, so just wanted to add that. Sorry.
And the thing that you just said, I don't want to gloss over that. How are you really?
Yeah.
And pause, give them space. But I think the thing that we as humans do, regardless of age, is when someone brings some pain to us, we want to fix it. And what they want is just a bouncing board, someone that can just hear them say out loud, this is hard. Of course, the fix can come later. And, what we do though is we tend to lecture and give too much guidance and mentoring, where at first we just need to get to know them and know how hard it is. That's the greatest fix of all. There's something else I've been thinking about, Sherilyn, this idea of masculinity. And, it's been kind of a rigid, closed box sort of definition. We have to expand what masculinity needs. We need to help means. We need to help young men see that strength includes things like kindness, gentleness, tenderness, protection, loyalty, and care. How many of us, as spouses, wives, long for our husbands to be kind and tender and, protective and loyal in a gentle way? And yet they've been conditioned throughout their life to be firm and masculine and strong and warriors. But warriors can be gentle. So masculinity can hold both courage and gentle compassion. So, we also want to teach repair and accountability. This is so important as they graduate into adulthood and then take on companions. They need to know how to repair relationships because relationships do get hurt. So, we need to show young men how to take responsibility for repair. When mistakes happen, this teaches them that relationships can recover and that mistakes don't define their worth. Learning repair techniques protects them from falling into shame and failing at relationships. What would it be like if we taught them it's okay and it's courageous to say, I was wrong, I made a mistake? So, one last thing. I know I've been taking up a lot of time, but I just want to talk about empathy. Notice and praise empathy when you see it. Boys don't need much help learning to be tough, but the world tends to teach them that empathy is a weakness, that empathy is not acceptable, that that's what girls do. But what they need are caring adults who give them permission to remain tender in those moments when it's most needed.
I love that. You remind me, Debbie, that one day I was watching a father and son after they'd lost a really important sports game. And the son was walking off the field trying not to cry. And I saw his dad put his arm around him and hold him and heard him say, wow, this hurts, doesn't it? Can we cry together? And there's no lecture, no fixing, just this understanding and empathy that you just talked about. And his son knew that his feelings were okay and safe with his dad. So as you talk about that, that visual comes so powerfully to my mind.
Oh, wow. What a significant moment to notice that. And then to say, wait, I want to do that too. And, so what does all this mean for us? And we include us because we're in the same category with so much power of influence with these young adolescent boys and men. So for us, this research is so incredibly hopeful. Even one emotionally safe adult can change the trajectory of a young man's life. One adult who sees him, one adult who listens to him, and one adult who believes in him openly. Sometimes the young man who appears the strongest is the one who needs the most to be seen by us. A single moment of understanding can stay with a young man for the rest of his life. Therefore, what, Sherilyn? Let's start with that.
Yeah, I'm really thinking about my grandsons. I'm looking at this differently. I'm so grateful that we've talked about this today. I feel like I'm way more aware of some things that I'm grateful to be more aware of. And so my therefore what is I have a grandson who's 11, just starting into this, a couple that are younger than that, which is important. That's an important time too. And I'm going to try harder as a grandmother to listen and to ask those questions, and just I don't know, do a better job of maybe getting more into their emotional world than I have in the past. So that's what I'm taking away and so grateful to do that and for our conversation today.
Oh, that's so wonderful. These grandsons are precious and they're not going to be young very long. And so we want to enjoy these years and these ideas. We hope that they've been helpful and to you and maybe inspiring. But what's my therefore what? I want to be more aware of the young men in my realm, in my neighborhood. I'm very aware of my grandsons and have been just privileged to have really close relationships with them. What about the boys in my neighborhood? That's today, nowadays, our garages go up and they go down. But maybe if I see one walking down the street or on his bike or somewhere close, pause my car and roll down the window and say, hey, just wanted to say hello, even if I don't know who they are. I want to do more of that. So thank you so much for listening today. Again, we hope that this has been inspiring to you. And you probably have many more ideas. Share those with your friends, spread the word, and we hope that we can make a difference in our circles in life.
Thank you, everyone. We love spending this time with you.